What's up, everyone? It's Adar coming at you with another episode of Startup Engineering Daily. Let's hop right into it. So our first tweet is from Hendrik at RevenueCat, and he announced that Duolingo did a podcast recently where they laid out all of their B2C, business to consumer secrets, and let's take a look. So the main points that they're talking about is that they kind of invert the idea of a paywall, where instead of making it so that all the good features are paid, they actually try to make the best features free and then get people to spread the word and eventually convert. So as you can see here, they said they avoided the quote unquote premium trap, that thing where you get a taste of revenue and immediately start paywalling all your best features. You just kneecap your own growth loop. Instead, Duolingo protects its quote unquote free moat. Your users aren't freeloaders, they're your marketing engine. The better the free product, the stronger your word of mouth. And then just like a quick one too, they say also try for $0 converts better than try for free. I think that's pretty interesting. I definitely like that, like a free trial, like put $0 for 7 days or something. I'm not in the business side of consumer apps anymore. I do work on a consumer app. I do work on a couple consumer apps for my clients, but I don't handle the monetization piece. However, it is interesting to consider and probably take a look at this podcast if you are working on a consumer app and working on monetization. Obviously, you can also look towards the Cal AIs of the world who have really succeeded at monetization, UGC driven, organic social driven. Those are the big pieces for the future. I do like this tweet as well, though, Amiraj, that says, you know, when you're backed by VC, you can have a much more substantial free tier, but that's also just a leverage play, you know? If you want to have a free tier, you probably need some VC of some sort, or you need to be extremely clever like Obsidian. But Obsidian also works towards prosumer apps, not necessarily as consumer as Duolingo. For me personally, I'm just working on professional apps these days, so much more easy to monetize and to prove the value that you're getting out of it. But I do believe that the consumer apps that I'm working on as well do have their own interesting monetization niches where they will be able to figure out and grow exponentially once the user base is kind of locked in. Next, we have Shu from Vercel. I don't know exactly what his role is, but everyone at Vercel thinks he's a legend. But just a quick update that they've added 12 new rules to the React best practices skills. That is server auth actions, server dedupe props, client passive event listeners, client local storage schema, re-render memo, re-render derived state, re-render simple expression, re-render move effect, re-render use ref transient values, rendering hydration suppress warning. That's interesting. That one is definitely going to be big because hydration warnings are trash. I think they have been working on making the diffs for the errors a bit more informative, but I'm not sure when that's been launched or if it's been launched. And then also they have render use transition loading and advanced init once. So yeah, I think it's interesting because these basically to install it, you have to essentially run add again. So they're not like remote skills. I kind of talked about this in the show yesterday, but I definitely think we're going to eventually get to like an API driven skills. You know, it's just text. It's not like we're loading like big files or assets or anything. So I believe in the future, it's going to be more remote where it's like you're connected, quote unquote, to the React best practices, and you'll just be able to get the new updates whenever you want, or you can fix it to a version. Maybe similar to like the NPM package manager where it's like version based, or you can update when you install. I'm not sure, but I know that like this local based just git clone is not the future for now. But to get the skills before we reach that inevitable future, this is the commando run. Next, we have Matt Pocock talking about this tweet that Reese Sullivan posted. I'm not sure if I talked about this yesterday, but I do find this tweet so interesting. Essentially what it says is a philosophy for Agents MD or for Claude MD, whoever you're passing it to, and it'll say, this code base will outlive you. Every shortcut becomes someone else's burden. Every hack compounds into technical debt that slows the whole team down. You are not just writing code, you are shaping the future of this project. The patterns you establish will be copied. The corners you cut will be cut again. Fight entropy, leave the code base better than you found it. I totally agree with this. It's interesting to see that Matt Pocock came up with this AIhero.dev site. I guess is his site, but this specific article is about like working with Ralph, I guess, and it's like an 11-step process. So if you want to go super deep, definitely a good resource to check out. But I think the overshadowing idea, which is so fascinating and I've been super interested in lately, is like AI, it's very easy for it to just build massive functions, you know, just kind of shit out code, but it works. You know, when you refresh and you're vibe coding, the code actually works. But we do need to focus on code being human readable moving into the future. We cannot focus on making code as abstract as possible. We cannot focus on just letting code be extremely verbose and just trying to press the AI advantage on velocity as much as possible. We have to focus on the sustainability of these code bases, ability to be debugged, and the ability to extend it as well from a human perspective and understand it and review it from a human perspective. So I really like this philosophy. I'm building this into some of my prompts as well. And especially when I PR review nowadays, I'm really focused on making sure that this is a human sustainable project, not just AI driven. And that's where it's the counterintuitive piece as well, is because AI actually makes it easier to do that. So I don't know why we wouldn't take advantage of the ability to prompt these agents to work exactly the way that we want and we know that we'll need for the future of these production products. And then kind of leading into that as well, we have Nick Dobos. I think he used to work at OpenAI, but I guess now he works at Browser Company. Or I guess he used to work at Twitter at least. But there was a big debate about code review. It was basically like kind of memeing, kind of satirical, but there is so much truth behind it. And it's so interesting how like much code review is coming back into force, because engineers have been doing it forever. But in the age of AI, it really is a clear synchronous bottleneck for humans where it's like, okay, we can't run any more AI code until we merge all these PRs, and we can have like 50 stacked PRs, but they're not going to get into prod until someone merges it, and takes responsibility for making sure that it's good. Maybe that should be the developer who's writing it and they can just merge it themselves. But at least in big organizations, you're still going to have some staff level, senior level engineers who are going to have to review the code before it gets merged into production. So people were joking around. They were like, oh, if you only knew how much money, I guess the main tweet was like, if tech CEOs knew how much money was being spent on people arguing over pointless nonsense. So yeah, if you see here, so the tweet that this is based on is this guy, Ian, saying if tech CEOs knew how much money senior engineers waste arguing in pull requests about pointless BS, they would actually just nuke the profession and replace all of us with AI. It's so interesting, because at least in the projects I work on, we try to be really quick with PR review, right? We try not to block. So the tech CEOs wouldn't do that to us per se, but I'm sure there are teams where it's like they're really going back and forth on some nonsense. Another tweet that was related to this was like, people arguing about use effect or not, which is kind of valid, because it's architecture, but it's also like, if it works, it works. Definitely a huge debate, but essentially what Nick says is that code review is weird because 99% of it is pointless and slows down dev by 50% or more, I'm guessing is the unit that he's trying to use here. But then 1% of the time it stops bad architectural decisions that save months to years of work or catches a critical issue that would cost $1 million and nuke the company. So true, if you merge some trash into the back end, it's going to wipe the database. It's going to ruin everything. So you really do have to review the code. And just because 99% of it is pointless, that doesn't mean that you're not still learning things and seeing how the code works and kind of building that human mental model. Because that's another piece that seemed kind of enticing that could be lost in the AI age, which is like not every human will have the mental model of the entire project. And I know at big companies, that's how that works already. And that's why you kind of split it up into microservices and different teams that own their own sections and have the mental model. But actually, once again, in the age of AI, kind of counterintuitively, it gives more humans the ability to have the mental model because all we have to do is review the PRs. We don't actually have to write the code, and we have to make sure that we write the code in a way that any human can review it. So actually all of us can have the mental model of the code and make sure that new things that are coming in aren't going to break stuff, aren't going to wipe databases, aren't going to cost money. And then kind of coming in from the last story, we have Martin Casado from A16Z, the venture capital firm, and he has an interesting take as well, which is that he says we're entering the golden age of software and computer science. I 100% agree with that. So much software is going to be written going forward, and that's going to introduce a host of new challenges. That's always how it is with new technology. But he thinks that computer science fundamentals actually on the low-level piece are going to be very important moving forward, which I kind of understand. If we go to first principles and we're like, okay, what would reduce the need for AI PR reviews? You look at Rust, you look at things where it's like, if it compiles, then it's valid, as opposed to TypeScript, where you never even know if it's going to work until it's in runtime, of course, but TypeScript helps a lot compared to like untyped JavaScript. I definitely think learning about computer science has never been easier. It's one of those things where it's like when Stack Overflow came out in the late 2010s, all the engineers prior were like, oh, all these idiots are going to Stack Overflow. They're just asking questions. They're not actually learning. But the access to information is what makes the people who actually want to work and learn more effective. If you don't want to work and learn, you're never going to learn. Even in AI, you're not going to learn anything if you don't care to learn. But if you actually care to learn, AI has never made it easier to learn any of these things. Self-teach. I'm a self-taught engineer, and I think the next generation of self-taught engineers will have it even easier. They'll be able to go even more low level. We have all these great projects now like Bun, etc., where you can really learn like how to shape the industry and move it in the way that you want. And it will be interesting to see in the future. Like, I definitely think, like, is Git going to be replaced? I don't know. We have Git work trees, so we can work on things parallelized, but it is possible that we have a new Git moving forward, a new VCS, a new programming language possibly. And it's just so exciting. I definitely think this is the golden age, as Martin said. And then next we have a tweet from Arpit. I just liked his tweet specifically, but it's news all around from OpenAI. They are just running one Postgres primary and 50 read replicas, so I guess they only have one main writer, and they're serving 800 million users on ChatGPT. They published an engineering blog. I haven't gotten a chance to read it fully, but it seems to basically say that they're doing like very vanilla PG bouncer, for example, in this tweet, cache locking, cascading reader replicas, and they're not using like anything custom, but they're serving 800 million users on just raw Postgres. That's super sick because Postgres, is kind of the standard right now for building databases, but people are like, oh, should we add ClickHouse? Should we add Redis? Like all these different pieces that we want to layer on top because they serve different purposes compared to a transactional database. There's caching, and then there's OLAP, or even with TidyB, there's HTAP, but it is really cool to see that they're doing this and they're making it public. That's what I love so much about the software development industry, is just everyone makes all the sauce public. We're just trying to flex, we're just trying to help the world, we're trying to prove that we know what we're doing and kind of validate our ideas in a peer review sort of way. So this blog, I definitely will hope to check out at some point, and you should definitely check it out if you find it interesting. OpenAI killing it on the engineering side, and Postgres is still winning in the age of AI. We talked about in the previous story, like, are there going to be new tools coming out, new databases, new programming languages, new version control systems, or are we just going to lean into the existing technologies because all the documentation's already been written and trained into the AI? I can't really say. I'm still sticking with Postgres, etc., but we'll have to see as we move forward into the future. If this kind of stuff interests you and you want to talk with some like-minded people, join the Audinato Discord in the description. Thanks.